Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1993 film When a Stranger Calls Back. This is the second episode in our look at the When a Stranger Calls franchise, for want of a better word, and it is episode 410. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He's a Best Writer Ringo nominee, again, Austin Chronicle and Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Okay, this has been one of those franchises that we just stumble upon when you just suddenly realize there's 3 When a Stranger Calls movies, and so
Yeah, I don't know that I would have called this a franchise until we started looking at it.
yes, yeah. I mean, there's a short film that led to the first film, and then there's actually 2 movies in one continuity, and then there's a reboot. So I mean, that's at least as much of a franchise as Shazam at this point. So we're good to go. I'm excited. This is going to be a fun one to discuss. The weirder we go down a strange, often made for television rabbit hole, the more excited I get. This is cool. And maybe there's something perverse about that. But that's how I feel. Okay. When a Stranger Calls Back is a 1993 American made for Showtime psychological horror film and a sequel to the 1979 classic When a Stranger Calls, which reunites Carol Kane and Charles Durning, who star as their original roles, Jill Johnson and John Clifford, with Fred Walton returning to direct. He was the director of the original. This film came out on Showtime April 4th, 1993. All right, so let's get our opening thoughts. And Drew, it's your turn. Let's go. Drew, Julia, Tony, and then I'll go. I would really love to know if you knew this movie, if you'd seen this movie, and opening thoughts, whatever you like. Drew.
This is the I know often it seems like people seem to think that I've seen every horror film ever made, but I actually I don't. First of all, I don't know if that's humanly possible, but I certainly I didn't know this movie existed until you brought it up after doing the first one. I found this to be a bit of a frustrating watch. It's certainly quite a bit of a step down from the first movie in my book. I do still like the opening scene quite a bit, even though it more or less follows the original. And I love the weirdness of the whole scene with the faceless ventriloquist dummy, which I'm sure we will get more into later. But this movie, I don't know who this was even for, because I would have been a kid when this came out. I don't know that there was I don't know if there was a bunch of clamoring for a sequel to When a Stranger Calls. So I don't know. I definitely don't think it was for the people in my age group. It feels and plays very dry, so it's not scary or lurid enough to really stand on its own. So yeah, I didn't quite enjoy it as anything other than an oddity, as you called it, Jason. I will say this, though. The thing I did have in the back of my mind is that, in a weird way, this predates the concept of a legacy sequel in some ways, because this does kind of follow the script of one of those where you bring back the older characters, but there's also these newer characters. So
it's a really good point.
Yeah, that is the one thing I did find kind of interesting. But as a movie itself, other than a few scenes, I did not really particularly enjoy this as a movie watching experience.
Wow. Thank you very, very much. Julia, so you had actually seen this before, correct? So what were your thoughts?
I don't remember if I'd seen it before. It seemed familiar. By the way, apologies if I sound congested. After 3.5 years, I finally caught the dreaded vid.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I feel okay for now. Anyway, I have a headcanon that this film is actually a completely different movie. Was actually intended to be a completely different movie based on all of two lines in the film, which are that they say twice that the window open 6 inches in the house. I think this is intended to be a supernatural movie where the ventriloquist is also able to do things like the ventriloquist and the guy are working together, and and the dummy, the
Hmm.
dummy, I mean, not I said the ventriloquist, the ventriloquist dummy is actually going into the house and like doing stuff because of the 6 inches thing. So that's
Hmm.
I believe that is the way this movie should have gone. It should not have been a sequel to the other movie, but should have been a totally different kind of Chucky-esque film about this ventriloquist and his dummy
Huh.
working together to do these things,
You
because
know,
it
I've
makes
seen
no
no
sense otherwise.
I've not seen any evidence about that, but I will tell you, I've experienced that before, where you see a movie and you go, well, like Die Hard 2 was already written, and then they said, hey, let's just put John McClane in this, and it becomes Die Hard 2, right?
Right.
Wasn't
Yeah,
And
so
that
they
three
maybe they
though?
had this idea, but then they
Uh,
should have taken out the 6 inches thing, because about the window, because the other, it just makes no sense. Like, they never come back to that. They never come back to what happened to the kids, which drives me crazy because they kill
yes,
the kids in the first movie and then they disappear the kids in the second movie. We don't even know what happened to them. So that just infuriated me, and it infuriated me that just the rage that I felt at Detective, what's his name, Detective Brower, dismissing the hysterical co-ed because he didn't like what
right?
I was like, obviously he has to be the bad guy because otherwise it makes no sense for him to be such an asshole. I'm sorry, but I mean,
Yeah.
I was just so, yes, I felt a lot of rage in this film about those things. Um, and but I enjoyed seeing Carol Kane again, and I enjoyed seeing Charles Durning again.
Did you enjoy
So
seeing Carol Kane do judo?
yeah, it was fun. I've also felt a little bit of irritation that her family got dispensed with, and we don't know why. Like,
Yes.
are her kids grown now, and she just doesn't talk to them, and she's divorced. I mean, being divorced is not that unlikely for a character with this much trauma, I guess, because. But
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway,
Who
so
knows?
that was also a thing that irritated me. But so yes, I found myself also frustrated.
I have had canon about that we can save until after opening thoughts.
Yeah, there are many questions that we're gonna get to go through. Tony, you had asked, I think you had asked if Die Hard 3 was the same way, and it was, yes. That was yet another floating around story that they were like,
yeah,
ah, this would be an interesting one.
I thought
That
three was more than two, but I thought two was because two came from. I don't want to split hairs, but two was.
it
I
came
thought
from
two
a
was from
book.
novels, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to derail us with Die
No, no,
Hard, but
no, it was cool.
just
It
No,
was
it's
in my head, I get that.
but
yeah,
it's
It's
the
not
same
even
thing.
Christmas yet. We can't be talking about Die Hard this much.
Yes.
That's right.
Before we like die, yeah, you're right. We'd go down a long rabbit hole of
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
that.
well, it's
But
Tony's turn anyway.
yeah, Tony, what are your thoughts?
So yeah, I mean, this I'm kind of with Drew. Like, it's cool to read. It's cool to visit like this. It's cool to see Carol. It's cool to see the cast members come back. And interesting, but I don't even know, Drew, if I like the beginning as a thing. It's especially when you've seen how tight the original is
Yeah.
and what a landmark. Like, they do things different. I am fascinated, and again, I'm going to kind of go back to it's hard to make a movie, so I try not to just slam things, but it's not a movie I would want to revisit. It just I just don't think it captures what even the original was, even though we talked about how there's kind of a disjunction with the original,
Yeah.
like it's kind of disjointed in how it flows.
Yeah.
This one, even though it has a little bit, it's kind of closer to two movies, but just like it feels really like, to me, it's a Showtime movie. It's in 4:3 actually on Tubi.
Mm.
So I don't know if it was even filmed in like film. It's in TV aspect ratio.
Yes.
Which I haven't checked the Blu-ray. Shout Factory did a 4K scan, so There's a good version of this out there. I was reading up on because I was like, was it always 4:3? Like,
I would
but
expect it
Tubi
would be 4:3.
Tubi you
If
don't
it's
always get.
Showtime,
Yeah, IMDb says that it was that it was 133 is the prop to 1 is the proper
Yeah.
ratio.
Hmm.
Let's see. But I
So
don't know.
weird.
It's hard to know. Yeah.
But like it's lit like a TV. It's lit like a police procedural from this time period.
mhm.
It's not. It doesn't look like because even at
Like
first,
an episode of In the Heat of the Night. Right?
yeah,
You know,
it
yeah.
looks, and that I'm not. And again, that's not a knock, but it has a feel. It also, it just felt kind of. It just kind of lays there until the really weird shit happens.
Yeah.
Like it's not particularly exciting in the way that I would have expected it, and it doesn't have the kind of weird sleaziness that the original had. It just sits kind of in the middle. I mean, I like Carol Kane teaching self-defense classes and stuff. Like there's some cool. And again, though, it is interesting that to me the through line is definitely trauma, like people's trauma. Through like everybody, the main characters have the similar thing, and I think it's interesting they didn't just go like, oh well, let's make it all about phones, because they could have done that too, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't do that. There is some suspense there, but it's not exactly about that. But until the weird stuff happens, it kind of feels like a police procedural that's on the non-mystery channel version, a Lifetime channel, because there's Lifetime Mysteries and then there's Lifetime, and it felt like somewhere in between that to me. And there's a time and a place for that, and that's fine. But when it, and I hate that that's a knock, but it just felt really kind of dull in some ways until it kicks off and to lands that I kind of like. Well, I wish this part, like if we'd gotten to the stuff that happens closer to the end and the weird ventriloquism and all those choices and the seedy, like when we get into the seedy kind of really traumatized, really bizarre parts, you're like, oh well, that's kind of feels like, why didn't that happen like 30 minutes earlier? And it's just strange choices. But everybody's still trying to do what they can with the material, and then that's interesting. But it's definitely not something I would really revisit on the regular. And but kudos to Shout for actually creating a 4K scan of the of a movie that's kind of just an interesting kind of footnote to me in how these movies, how it went from the original to this.
Yes. I'm really happy that we're looking at this because I love half forgotten Gonzo stuff. I mean, if you remember, we also talked about the Stepford kids, or whatever they called the Stepford children. I can't remember. Yeah, the Stepford children, which was a made-for-TV. Oh, and we did Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby, which was yet another TV sequel. So I have a real thing for these strange, forgotten television sequels to classic
I'm gonna
movies.
cut you off right there.
Yeah.
This is not that strange of a movie, and I think the problem with is the original is a weird movie, and this movie is not weird. Like, it has parts of it that are very weird, and you think you're about to see, like, you find yourself wishing the rest of the movie was weird like that.
That's
this movie is actually quite dry.
Yeah, no, it is. And what Tony was saying about it seeming sort of like a Lifetime movie, it's actually in many ways less violent than a lot of those things. Although since it's Showtime, you've also got nudity, which is just hilarious and strange, and it reminds me that
it's not hilarious. It's also annoying. It was like so gratuitous. I was like, why do these waitresses have to be published?
I don't know if you remember this, but this era of the late 80s and in the early 90s is the era of like Showtime and HBO television series would be just like regular series, but with toplessness, because that was the only thing they could come up with that was differentiating about being.
Well, it's also probably wouldn't have been R-rated with.
I'm hurting myself, rolling my eyes so hard.
No, you're right. You're precisely correct.
Movie, there was a point in time where if a horror movie wasn't rated R, that was a death knell against it. And so this movie is so lacking in, like, I don't think anybody actually dies on screen, and I think the kids are the only ones that do die. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We should.
So
And in
We don't
fact,
even know
that's
what
a.
happened to
Yeah,
them.
we should
No.
talk about the plot. In fact, but yeah, that was just my opening thought.
Well,
Is
Julia was supposed to die, but they made him
Mm.
rewrite the ending because they thought it was too depressing.
Huh.
And so she didn't. Her
So
her
she
suicide attempt ended up just being her. I should say her being shot, because we actually don't know for sure that he shot her versus probably she
pretty
shot.
sure that he
Probably
shot her.
yeah, but I'm saying like they
Uh,
never even.
the bullet was caught in her glorious early 90s mullet.
There you
I.
go.
Oh my God. Okay.
Her
All
Ellen
right.
DeGeneres hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's oh my gosh, who is it? Now I'm forgetting who the director is. But it was Walt. Okay, so Walt, it says 20th Century Fox. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to read this thing, but it's not. The Showtime picked up this film and we're overall, this is again IMDb. We're overall pleased with the casting and script and agreed to distribute the film on the condition that the ending be altered to a more happy ending.
Huh.
Walton ultimately relented, but he still stands by his statement that he hates the final ending.
Oh, well, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so all right. To start with, Walton comes back and he's directing a sequel, and the first thing he does, he goes, I'm going to do exactly what I did last time. We're going to open with a long, extended short story all its own with the babysitter alone. Sort of a reprise of the opening of When a Stranger Calls. This, I feel, is actually a pretty good idea because it's kind of neat to do this again. Although Tony, you pointed out it means you still have to do tricks, and they're not as interesting tricks this
No,
time
it's
because
not. It's not as tight, and her whole approach is just weird, and it's not. It's not suspenseful
so
until
tell
like
us
the
what happens then.
very end.
You've got this girl Jill who's a
Yeah.
babysitter.
Well, a guy, she's mousy. Seems to be scared of everything. Already. I don't know. Like, definitely. I don't know. I don't know if she knows the parents very well, but definitely they're. And then this guy comes up and says, "Hey, can you let me in? I need to call because my car's broken down."
Talking through the door. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's smart enough to let him in, but she doesn't do the latches or anything. We keep showing that like endlessly. Here's what the
Yes.
door looks like. Here's what the door. By the way, locks look like this. Everybody, in case you missed it, she's not doing that. Like, I'm gonna keep showing you this, and she never changes it.
And
And then
she, I don't know if you noticed this, but she turned off the water of the tea she was making, and it went off anyway. So I was like immediately going, oh, he's already in the house.
That's
And I
your
guess she
first
might
tip
have
that he's
been
already
like,
in
I
the
could have
house.
sworn, well, she might have been like, I could have sworn I turned this off, but I guess I didn't. But I mean, she should have already been like,
Well, that's my
that's
first problem with
sketch.
the story is I don't know if he's cutting things for time or what, but
Yeah,
there
because
are
once
so
the
many
piece of
things.
paper is missing off her pad, no, that's
Right.
it.
yeah,
It's over.
There are lots of these little things that I guess he would probably say, well, don't be stupid. You don't need some dialogue. But I really do need some dialogue to go ahead and put a button on some of these things and go,
well, because the trick is that the phone is out,
right.
so she's never making these calls, and she's telling the guy, and yeah, like that's scary. Like it could be scary as the guy at the door. She does the right thing, like not letting him in at least, and
And not telling, I think it's fine not to tell him that the phone is out because she
oh,
doesn't want him
of
to know that. Yeah.
course. No, she's like, but every stage of that is awkward and slow.
Yeah, the
Whereas
slow is the real
the build up in the original is a really nice, like button down piece.
Yeah.
And to redo it, I mean, it's a shame to redo it and just have it not be as good. And so that goes back and forth until finally she is like, hey, I think somebody's in the house. Things get rearranged and changed. And then eventually she opens the door. There's a guy who's coming after her. We cut away, and then we find out that the kids were taken. They never show up again.
Yes.
At least this time, though, she did check on the kids at the beginning.
Yes.
And she checks on them a couple times.
Okay.
She checks on them twice before they disappear.
So let's stop there. That's the end of the opening sequence, which just like last
But
time.
again, it shouldn't be
almost
because
half
there's
an
just
hour.
so much. Like we don't know what happens to the kids. We don't know how he got them out.
Also, what's the deal with the freaking shirt on the ground?
Yeah, there's so much weird stuff that, like you said, it feels like they made a different movie and then they just we're just cutting it apart and making it another.
So
movie.
the kids are missing, and there's a shirt on. There's clues all over the place. And so you're setting up all these things that we as audience members are expecting are going to pay off and be explained to us over the next hour, right? And we are going to be frustrated again and again as they miss opportunities to fill us in on why something happened or whatever. It's super duper strange. But so far we don't know we're that far off base, okay? Because, okay, the kids are missing. It's 5 years later, the woman is super traumatized, and now we get some good stuff. There's this thing early on when Carol Kane, who is reintroduced as now a dean of women's services at a university, she very quickly assesses that Jill, who is complaining that somebody might have gotten into her apartment, is a very particular kind of person, and
No,
she
no, no. You
gives.
cannot skip the asshole detective
Okay,
who tries to get
I
rid
just
of the
want to make
kids
this
before she
point real
shows
Yeah,
quick.
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Well, actually, you can make the point. Julia, which is the character played by Carol Kane. I'm sorry, Jill, the character played by Carol Kane, comes in because the detectives, like the one that you're talking about, are not listening to her. And go ahead and and that's good too, right, Julia? Doesn't it seem like exactly what we might expect? And it's exactly the kind of thing that
No,
we
but
want a
I
character like
don't
that to
think
walk
so. I
into.
think it was completely unbelievable because she says, I okay, so her what's happened is that there is a child's piece of clothing in her closet that was not there before. So she goes to the camp to the sheriff or the cops, whatever, of where her college is, Julia, the girl from the first segment, and
Yep.
says, I this something's been going on. I think it's related to something that happened several years ago. There's a child's piece of clothing appeared in my closet. That is freaky as shit. There is no way a
Yeah.
detective would not look into that. There's just no way. And so the fact that he goes, it's a hysterical co-ed. Just don't even look into it. Don't worry about
Right.
it. Maybe we could get women's. Can I call women's services? Fine, but make sure it's not that Jill person. And then it turns out to be the Jill person somehow anyway, even though I guess the guy maybe called her deliberately. And then she, of course, does believe it. But that guy, I really believed that he had to be the killer or the bad guy because otherwise it made no sense for him to just be so
See, I thought
dismissive.
this was just the movie being kind of feminist and showing that men don't believe women. So
That
I
would be
thought,
true if all she said was, I feel like, a book got moved and my clock got changed. That would be fine.
right.
But the fact that she says a child's piece of article of clothing has appeared in my closet 5 years after two kids went missing while I was babysitting them. There is no way that guy doesn't look into that. No
Yeah,
way.
that's true.
So it
No,
just
you're
really
right.
made
You're exactly
me
right.
livid.
But the
I
thing, though, if he did look into it, then we wouldn't have any reason to bring in the characters from the original movie. So
yeah, that's true.
the
Yeah,
answer to your question is so the movie can
so
So
the
the
happen.
movie
movie can
happened.
happen.
Shout out to Ryan George. Yes.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. You're
Okay.
so
Well,
right.
fine.
Yeah, I mean, but so Carol Kane comes in, and we're introduced to yet another Carol Kane from what we saw before. Because 1979 we last saw her, and she was an apple-cheeked, curly-haired young lady and young mom. Now she is a suit-wearing, a grown woman who is now a professional and ballsy and teaching teaching self-defense classes. But in this first scene where we meet her, the script does its best job that it does for the entire film, which is this
Mhm.
thing that she reads out this monologue where she goes, I'm going to bet that that woman's apartment is like this. I'm going to bet that she conducts herself like this, and I believe her because of this. And it was a picture of trauma, and it was a picture of a woman who knows her business really well. I loved it. Like
I
that was
think
great.
I think that speech. So this is something Jason. People have read. Which book, Jason? Is it with? Is it the first Alex Van Helsing, or is it the
Yes.
first Nemo that has the
It's the
contact
first
lenses?
Alex Van Helsing with the
The first
contact
Alex Van Helsing.
lenses. Yeah.
Jason describes him putting on contact lenses, and a lot of people have said this is only able to be written by somebody who actually wears contact lenses because it was so perfectly detailed. That's how I felt about Carol Kane's speech. I felt like whoever wrote it really knew what it was like to have that kind of trauma in their life because it was just so detailed and so like emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's how
love
I
that.
feel about there's some scenes in Magnolia
Mm.
about hospice care,
Mhm.
and I can't watch that movie. Like it's an amazing movie, but I saw it once. I think I may have revisited part of it, but
Yeah.
having somebody go through, having my grandfather go through all the hospice stuff was like, that was amazing. And
Yeah.
boy, am I not wanting to revisit that. So it is really great when you have somebody who really kind of gets it and resonates. So
Yeah. That's it's an excellent point about Magnolia, by the way. I haven't seen that since we saw it back in '99, I guess. But this moment, so yes, this is good stuff, and it's so weird how pedestrian the rest of the movie is, except for in flashes, But this part, really shines, and it's all Carol Kane. It's all just a camera on Carol Kane talking. That was good. Uh, so anyway, by the way, all three main characters, their names start with J. This is a super weird choice in his script. It's Jill, Julia, and John are our main characters. That is strange, but whatever. So Jill and Julia start hanging out, and because Julia, the young lady, is trying to get over this, and so Carol Kane's, I'm going to just call her Carol Kane. Carol Kane says, "Why don't you start shadowing me, and I'll teach you some tools, and we'll also start investigating your case, like whether somebody was breaking in. And by the way, to do that, like clockwork, now we're like, I'm going to bring in a consultant, a man that we haven't seen in a long time, and it's Charles Durning." And
So,
yeah,
before we get to Charles Durning, like, I have a theory as to what happened to her husband and kids.
okay,
I
please.
kind of,
Yeah, this is a
I
good place for it.
think
Yeah.
I think that periodically, if as like what we see here is basically kind of her operating as not only a caregiver to this woman, but she's also like going a little bit vigilante. Like she's
Mhm.
like, we're gonna get into this case and we're gonna hunt this guy down. And I kind of wonder if this is behavior that she indulges in a lot, and
Mm.
maybe her husband was eventually like, yeah, I can't deal, see ya. And
Very
like
possible.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if there may have been even dialogue that about her getting a divorce, but then like at some point it just ended up on the cutting room floor, because it just seems like it would have been simple to say, yes, I was married, but and had kids, but I got a divorce and he got custody.
It's very possible. I mean, you're describing a kind of hypervigilance that might drive somebody away. The funny thing is, here she seems like, you're right that she is. She says something like, "If you're not willing to take a life, you're not willing to be safe," or something. Like I can't remember, but she doesn't seem.
It's something like if you want to live, I don't remember either, but it was
Basically,
yeah.
it was
You have to be prepared to indulge in violence, or you're going to have violence visited upon
right.
you.
Yeah.
So, okay, we know that from the world of superheroes and vigilantes, so that's okay. But having said all that, she seems pretty well adjusted now, but I am totally ready to believe you that she could have ruined her marriage and her family life from dealing with trauma, probably in less healthy ways. Yeah, man, it would have solved so much just to give us a single line of dialogue. One line would have handled that. I
I
would have.
think they probably just assumed that people don't really
Yeah.
care, like hadn't seen the original enough
Yes.
to care that much about the continuity.
Oh, I
You know,
found the quote, by the way.
I'm
Go ahead,
sure you're
sorry.
right. Yeah, go ahead, Julia.
It's just situations do arise where there is no one around to help you, and you have to defend yourself by whatever means necessary. You cannot say you don't believe in violence unless you also say you don't believe in living.
Yeah.
Well, there we
I
go.
mean, that's also street fight rules. Like you can't trust
That
somebody
and
until
don't talk
they're
about
down.
Fight Club.
I mean,
Yeah.
although cut to reality, there's a woman fined for fighting back too hard against a sexual
Yeah.
assault, and you're just like,
Yeah.
what the like?
Yeah.
But yes, I'm with Carol Kane. Like, you better fight like
Yeah.
hell, right? I mean, the fact that that's still a thing is just awful. But yeah, I mean, it's awesome to see her like really laying down the law. She's great.
yeah, I don't think I've ever seen, just kind of like with the first one, where we're saying Carol Kane doesn't normally play characters like this. That's definitely true here, where Carol Kane is kind of like the post Ripley, post
Good
Sarah
point.
Connor kind of badass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that, and all to the better. I like seeing her as a boss who can do the kung fu and is comfortable with her weapons, and she takes the young lady to the shooting range, and she's teaching her things like just basic gun safety and stuff like that. We were laughing about how in this film, Julia, the babysitter, who's now 5 years later is a college student, the way that she dresses is she wears these mom jeans, which I suppose is just what everybody's wearing in 1993. She wears
That's the truth.
vests and she wears big checkered shirts and jackets, and she has a really solid mullet. And her look is what I would call like 1990s.
Ellen DeGeneres.
Yeah, right. Very good. Yes, it is totally, and I don't even understand why this is the case. I mean, why would you dress her like she is a member of the LGBTQ community, and then there's no dialogue or anything like that?
Well,
There's nothing
I mean,
to
they
in.
don't give her any. Actually, I'm fine with that because they don't give her any
Yeah, they
sexual. It's
just
not like they dress her that way and then they have her have a boyfriend. So, that doesn't really bother me. But it
Right.
was an interesting choice.
She's in theory, she's so wounded that she's just completely she's aromantic, asexual. There's nothing. She doesn't appear to have any friends. So she's
I do
been.
remember,
Mm.
teenagers dressing like that, like some of my older brother's friends dressing like that.
Mm.
Like
sure.
and the way she was in the setup scene too, like with the sort of like Catholic schoolgirl gone goth kind of look
Yeah.
too. So like, those are this is definitely a look into two, because like I think when people think of 90s, they either think of like 90s hip hop or grunge, and
Right.
these are two things that were a look that
Yeah. You're
aren't
you're
quite
totally
as
right.
cliche.
Yeah. No,
I
it's
mean,
true.
eventually, people would just be like, "Oh, I guess she went to Lilith Fair or whatever." You're like,
Yeah.
Yes.
like I don't think Lilith Fair is out. I think it comes later in the '90s, but it's definitely the like that. But again, it's also just part of culture. Like it fits in '93. I mean,
Yeah,
but
I guess it does. I
her
didn't know a lot of.
personality is what you're getting at though is like it's a look, but we don't get in we don't get a lot about her character other than she's constantly scared. That's
Yeah.
her defining trait, and part of that is because you're supposed to, but I think because that's the main trait, it's harder to even get into, like, you feel bad for her and you
Yeah.
feel compelled, like, and you understand, especially like it's really interesting because Zill's gonna help her because I've been, she goes, I've been through that. Carol Kane's character is gonna really has a bond with that.
Yes.
But as a viewer, because she's just constantly kind of, biting her thumb and looking around and everything, we don't get a lot of her
Yeah.
other than that. That's her defining trait. And
I would love to know
that could
more
be
about her.
trauma. That could, and that happens in trauma, and that's okay.
True.
But it would have been nice to get, again, it feels, this is another way it feels like a much shorter, like an hour-long procedural, because usually those victims just have that.
Right.
They're
Well, it should
victims.
be said, this movie is barely feature length.
Right,
That's true.
But you know what I mean, like in a hour long with commercials setup, where we get, where it's basically just the professor and the cop, the ex-cop, if that was happened every week, right? If we had these
Right.
two characters, the victims kind of come in and out, and they have these kind of really, this victim is really has this trauma and this, and it still feels like that, and it
Yeah,
would have
that's
been nicer to have a more fully fledged character, because also eventually we don't get her hardly at all because
She's in a
she tries to
coma.
commit
she's suddenly in a
suicide,
coma.
right?
I mean,
Which is
imagine
awful
if.
too. I mean, that's that where I think there's kind of a shift again towards it actually does become more the buddy cop movie
Yes.
than it is
Yes.
about the victim.
Yeah, where yeah. I mean, at this point, really, where Charles Durning comes in, it's mostly Charles Durning and Carol Kane are getting evidence from the girl and also from other places where they go. I was gonna say, just imagine if Julia, the babysitter, imagine if she were a viola player, and the college was a jazz consortium, and she was in an argument with her professor over a way of interpreting a piece of music, but she's also hyper vigilant about being stalked. Then you're like, I get an idea of who this person is. Like you're totally right. We got nothing here other than that she's a mullet
And the
and she
trauma
chews
is, I
her
mean,
toenails.
that can be valid,
Well, of
but it
course,
also leads to the movie is more the buddy cop thing and less about the victim,
and
and
maybe
that's just a
that's what
choice
we're
they
supposed
made,
to do. I
and
mean,
that's okay.
and as we talked about, that's one of the difficulties with, as Drew called it, the legacy sequel is now you've got two sets of characters competing for time: the new
Mhm, mhm.
killer, the new victim, plus the old stars who are doing the investigation. It
Well,
is,
and the
yeah,
killer in this, like, if you want to compare it to the original, they spent so much time
yes,
developing the killer in the original film, whereas
Yeah.
this guy is, other than the fact that he's a ventriloquist and he's apparently really good at body paint, we don't know a thing about him.
yes,
It
yeah.
yeah, when
Uh,
it goes off on that, like, I wanna get there, but yeah, the
so,
3rd act is just wow.
it's about halfway through actually, and it's not even
That's
quite the third
It
because
doesn't feel like
it.
that. It felt to me like the part where we get to the burlesque club
Oh
felt
yes.
like an eternity, and so I just lumped that all in, and it is the last 30 minutes or so. It's not
So
we
so
spend about an hour before we get to any of that at all,
yeah, I mean, so
if I remember correctly. At least it felt, maybe this is me, it felt that
well,
way, but I'm pretty sure I
what I'm
looked at the
suggesting
time.
is the place where they start saying, "Hey, maybe he's got some special skills," is Charles Durning and Carol Kane are investigating, and they go back to the original where the kids disappeared when Julia was a babysitter, and they're like, "Okay." So apparently the killer never actually he was always on the inside, but he's throwing his voice, so it sounded like he was outside,
Which
and
is just such a ridiculous
so they
conclusion
set
to
up
come
they
to.
set
Yeah,
up the following clue.
I
Oh,
I
go ahead.
do kinda like that it didn't, again, like I said, it didn't just become like, and now new phone stuff.
Right.
But it is so patently ridiculous on the opposite end that it's like I'm torn. Like, they were really going, well, what would accomplish something similar? What if he's a ventriloquist? And they went with
And
it.
let's call it when a stranger calls back, even though he's not going to call or call
Right.
back.
Right.
I
Of
think he
course.
actually does
Very
call
good point.
one point,
Yeah.
but
It would
That's
was
be
a
funny if
good
he
point.
somehow like did throw his voice and it just went ring 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 broom broom. I'm like,
So,
wait, what? But yes, but I gotta say I enjoyed they commit to that, but
yeah, the
it's a
w
choice, you know?
it's such
they
a wasted
establish
character. I
they
love that.
go,
I love the paint.
"Alright."
I love the body paint. I loved the cartoonish eyes when he opens his eyes and it's dark
Oh,
and he's
yeah.
hiding and it's just like it looks like in the cartoons when there's just eyes in a
Well,
bush
Julia,
or
I
something.
would
Mhm.
like you to explain his powers, but I want to describe what the clues are that they set up, that they're going to deliver to us, what the solution is. The clues are somehow this guy got through a 6-inch slot in the window. Somehow he can throw his voice, so maybe he's a ventriloquist. I unfortunately answered that one. Somehow he can throw his voice. That's the clue. Somehow
That's
he
not a
got
clue,
through a
that's a
thin slot,
conclusion. That's a
and he
conclusion.
stole the kids and made them disappear.
Those are not clues.
Okay,
Those
they
are
are
conclusions.
mysteries. They're mysteries.
Yes.
The clue was a 6-inch slot. The mystery is how did he do it? The clue was missing kids. The mystery is where did they go? And the clue was he seemed to be in two places at once. The mystery is how did he do it?
Oh
They
man, it would
answer
have
how
been
many
so
of
Why
much
those?
so
creepier. It would have
so
been go ahead, Julia, sorry.
that the way because we'll back up to the beginning of the movie when he tells so the guy outside quote unquote says, I noticed there's somebody inside, you need to leave right now because I saw them moving around inside. He's behind you in the living room. So turns around, sees a guy there, opens the door, and the parents that are coming home.
Yes.
What how did they not see the guy in the living room? How did he get out? What happened? Why do they assume that there's not two people? One of them was actually just around the side of the house and like dashed away when he saw the car pull up. Why? There's no reason for them
Also,
for him
where
to
did the
assume
kids
that.
go?
Where
And
did the kids go and where did the guy in the living room go?
right.
So, do you know how much creepier it would be if he keeps turning kids into ventriloquist dummies?
Oh
That
my
Oh
god,
man,
that's what I'm saying.
that would have
Turning it
been
into a
creepy as
supernatural
that's a
hell.
movie.
wonderful
That movie would be
concept,
so
Tony.
man. That is
If
another. Yeah, Tony and I are going to write this another lavish art where the ventriloquist dummy is supernatural, and yes, it's the kids, previous kids being turned into
Wow.
ventriloquist dummies.
right,
Like
That's
brought
it.
some
back to
bizarre
life.
phantasm version where
I
you know.
love that crazy idea because yeah, when we finally meet it, it's like we meet a character that doesn't answer any of those questions that we raised and
Exactly.
raises all kinds of new questions because what we meet is a guy who has what powers, Julia? Can you explain what his powers are? Because they're powers. I don't care what you want to call them. They're whether they're magical or not. He has some powers. So what are they?
Well, the ventriloquist just is really good at, ventriloquism, which is throwing his voice into this into this dummy that's got no face. He's got a
Throwing
dummy
his
that has no
voice and making
face
it appear it's coming from somewhere else.
from
So
somewhere else, and he's got the most gorgeous body makeup talent to be able to do the thing that will later show up in Sherlock Holmes, starring Robert
Yes.
Downey Jr., where he could just make himself disappear into a like a a
Right.
couch or a curtain or whatever. So he is taking photographs of places and then recreating the makeup so that he could just blend in. It's absolutely gorgeous, that
So
effect.
that is how he gets into places. Is he didn't have to go through the 6-inch slot. He was always there because he snuck in at some earlier point
Yeah.
and painted it and wore paint to disappear.
So the window thing is just a red herring at this
So
point.
once again, a line of dialogue would really help me out here.
Or just don't have the stupid window be open.
No, but that was the mystery.
well, but
You know,
we should lead up to the also leading up to this though, where we get to this is
Yeah.
very tragically Julie tries to kill herself and
Or gets shot.
Well,
or gets shot or
it's
but
ambiguous.
to us right now that's what it looks like, right? And so they're trying to solve, hey, that's bizarre. She's in the hospital. He also comes in like a Michael Myers almost like outfit and starts poking her, which
yes,
is
that
creepy
was
as hell.
that was
so
really wild.
creepy.
Like this is
She's like hitting. He wasn't just poking her. He was hitting
Yeah,
her
I
really
mean,
hard on the abdomen.
but
Yeah.
all of like that's creepy, but we get these creepy bits that it commits to, but they don't always all gel.
Right.
Well, and we
And
find out later that he's taking pictures of her breasts, which of course, again, super creepy.
yeah, just
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many bizarre choices. And also, his act. What's funny about when they go to the eventually we track him down to
Yes.
his ventriloquism act. Like who this it's at a burlesque club, and by burlesque club we mean that they're
Titty
topless
bar.
waitresses. Yeah, but who vetted this act? Like, did he?
Obviously not
did he
the
pitch him
manager
on one
because he
act?
throws him off of the stage.
Did
But
he? But yes, that happens. But what I'm saying is, did he pitch them on a traditional mannequin act, like ventriloquist dummy act, and then
Probably.
he he gets on stage, and this again this crazy choice. It's fascinating because he basically just becomes an existential.
Yeah, I
like,
kind of love that. That would have been a huge hit at like a beat poet bar or something.
Sure, of course, all of that. But he chose So they hire this guy.
He wants to be a touring ventriloquist. Obviously, he says he needs the work.
I know,
Oh my
but they hire again. I wonder, did he pull a bait and switch? Because
It's not the
also,
audience,
by the
yeah,
way,
it's
at
not
this
the
point,
audience.
he stands in the shadows, and we see his makeup prowess because he's painted himself completely black, like
Yes.
charcoal black, to remain in the shadows. And I guess he closes his eyes because we see his eyes later when he's in the dressing room, and it's pretty stark and just like, whoa, this is bizarre. But his dummy at this point has no face.
Yes.
And that's
And he
apparently
just-
like a Japanese dramatic puppet theater thing. The bunraku, is that how you say it?
Yeah,
Well,
it's
it's
painting yourself
creepy as
black.
hell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No, but I can't imagine he showed up with Bunraku puppet and goes, "Hey, this will fit in great with your."
Well, like
with your strip club."
honestly, like back in the day, yes, you did have ventriloquists and comedians, performing alongside strippers.
Sure, of course.
In the 90s, this is like a couple of years too early for like sort of neo vaudeville retro burlesque. And it's
Sure.
like, so the bar comes off as Julia put it, a titty bar. Like,
Yeah.
it does feel weird that they even have a ventriloquist to begin with. Because like when they kick him off the stage, a pole dancer just comes on, and
Yes.
I'm fine with this in theory. It just it kind of,
Well,
it's like it kind of puts it in like a weird time and place that it's
sure.
like
it
I
feels
don't
very
know.
weirdly
That's
false
why it's all
also.
bizarre, Drew. Like you hit it on. Like it says burlesque theater, but it's all, none of it quite gels. Is the problem. And also, like, I just like the idea of
And
this,
yet,
like
I think this
existential
is the
guy
best.
clearing the room. Like, because I've been at shows where people, like, the wrong band is on the bill and clear the room. And
Yeah.
just watching this guy, like, and watching the main guy just be so angry, like, what the hell are you doing? Like,
And
we
yet,
have
this
women
is
with
the best
their
scene
breasts
in the
out.
whole movie.
Yeah, we have women with their breasts out, and people are leaving. Do you know how hard that is? Like, you jerk.
Yes.
Like, just anger, and he keeps on. Like, he has to be dragged off the stage. Like,
Oh,
he's
well,
like,
this is
I
one of
am
my
committing
favorite
to this
moments in the
thing.
movie. Is the manager is like, I can't believe you're driving people out of my titty bar. I want you to go clean the ladies' room, and so he throws him into
Clean the
Yeah.
toilets.
Well,
into
yeah.
the he
What
throws him into the dressing room, which has a toilet in it, which is completely false. And then there's this super nice stripper in there who was like, I kind of liked your act. And he says, oh, okay, you want my dummy? So I like that the nice stripper got a free dummy. That was nice. But
so weird.
but I was like, what
I
is
was
going
honestly
on?
expecting the nice stripper to become a character the same way as
Or
the
a
barfly.
victim. I thought
Yeah,
Well,
or a
like the
victim, yeah.
barfly, like the
Yeah.
barfly
Yeah.
woman in the original movie.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Like I thought that was going to be a setup because it seemed like this was the start of us getting to know this guy. But the problem is the movie's mostly over at this point. You know what other scene though? Speaking of scenes with him that are effectively creepy, the scene where Carol Kane goes to talk to Jill. Is it Jill or Julia? There's too many J names.
Yeah, I know.
Julia is the teenager from the beginning, and Jill is Carol Kane.
Yeah, okay. So Carol Kane goes to talk to Jill.
To Julia.
And
No,
to
Carol
Julia.
Kane is Jill. Yes. To Julia.
She goes to talk
You
to
can
the
just say
girl
the
in the
babysitter
coma,
if you want.
the babysitter. And she talks to her for a minute and then, leaves. And then it turns out this guy's been in the room the whole time. And he
Yeah,
just
that was
goes
so creepy.
and he
Yeah.
starts punching the unconscious babysitter.
Julia,
No, that's what we
yes.
were talking
So
about. In almost
demented.
but almost like in a Michael Myers suit.
Yes.
Like he's got
That
a,
was so
he's
weird.
really pale, and he's like that's what we're talking about. He starts
Very, very odd.
hitting her and then like poking her, and then gets more and more forceful, and then we just kind of like, and then he goes away. Like, what?
I wish that this movie had been, taken a few more cues from the original movie and that it had spent a little bit more time with this guy because he seems interesting in a macabre sort of way. And I you could have had a little bit more of like the cat and mouse with him and Carol Kane and Charles Durning, and like it's one of the things that's frustrating is that there are a couple of scenes in here which are effectively creepy and effectively weird, and the rest of the movie is just sort of there.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Yeah, that if you're told to close your eyes and hey, think of what happens when a stranger calls back. Unfortunately, what pops into your head are not the weird moments like the dummy and the nice stripper and the guy walking out of the darkness in the hospital. You think of these brightly lit scenes in various rooms where people are having conversations because
they're just hanging out.
Although
sitting at a table.
Although, man, oh man, considering the heat wave we have had this summer, all the scenes of the fall leaves and the rain, I was like, I so wish we were having this movie's weather right now.
I mean,
I'm with
Yeah.
you.
I mean, this is Vancouver in '93. I don't know what time of year it is, but it just looks like that. It looks so comfortable all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is
Nobody
where
is
they
sweating in this movie.
right, right. It's where they filmed all these, like the X Files and Highlander and Night, whatever what was it, Forever Night? All those shows of the '90s were all
Forever Night,
filmed
yeah.
around there, like the same
Jason and I
college
actually
campuses.
went to Vancouver and got to watch an episode of Highlander, the TV show, be filmed. It was
Yeah, that was
super
so
fun.
fun. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. We just went up from Seattle. That was a blast. What a good time. Um,
Did you
so
see TV's Adrian Paul?
I
We
did
did.
not.
No, we
No,
did.
did
Oh, you're
we?
right. It wasn't Adrian because was it just well we'd met Adrian Paul though. It's just that it wasn't at when he was getting when they were filming. When they were filming, it was a scene. I think it was
It
just
was
Richie and
Byrne. It
huh?
was James Byrne, the
Yeah,
blues
Jim
the
Byrne.
blues player. Yeah.
Richie and whatever the Jim Burns character was called. But yeah, they were in his bar,
Yeah.
and I guess you're right that Adrian Paul wasn't in that. But we did meet Adrian Paul, and I made Jason take a picture of me with him and the guy who played Mythos. And Jason was mortified, but I love that picture. It's my favorite possession, pretty much of all the things.
Well, it's true. It's true. Whenever I meet famous people, I don't ever take pictures, and but you're right. You've got the picture forever. So what do I know? Honestly, why would you listen to me about this? Okay, so yeah. As we've talked through this, now I understand that we're meant to go. Hey, how does he get through the teeny spaces? And then you go, he gets through by visiting a place numerous times, taking Polaroid photographs, building the costume from it, and then sneaking into the place earlier and waiting to reveal himself later. That's how he does it. Honestly, just a line of dialogue would help me, but whatever. That's the answer. That's how he.
Well,
That's
like
how he
Show
until
does
you
it.
don't
said
show
that,
don't tell, Jason.
but no,
I
but
guess.
until you said that, I got so distracted by the 6-inch window thing that I forgot that it didn't even occur to me that's how he was in the house. That he was just hidden,
Yeah.
like he was just hidden in plain sight. That's duh. I mean, it is obvious now that you say it, but the 6-inch window thing just really was such a distraction for me
So
that I
Drew, we're on
forgot
the
about
edge of a rule here, which is that absolutely show don't tell, but unfortunately you have to show people what you're showing them.
Oh, I
And
was lying. They totally should have explained more in this movie.
well, no, but you're right, exactly. It's clearly when people do it right, you get the information at the time that you're asking for it, so you understand that a syllogism has been completed, and that's what is failing here. Is that you don't quite get exactly what the point of learning something is. Like that's what the Polaroids are for. He sneaks in early so he can build his costume from it. But it just drives me crazy. Anyway, um, takes decent early, takes a photograph. He took a photograph of Carol Kane's drainage pipe so that he could build that section as a piece of makeup. We never see him doing that, by the way. We never. It would have been real good.
Yeah, again,
Was
it would have been cool, right? Yeah, to have like the scene that you have in Silence of the Lambs where where you're
yes,
seeing the guy doing his makeup and all that. That would have been great. There's a
yes.
lot of things that could have been better about this film.
So anyway, we do get to the final sequence, which is I don't remember why exactly he starts stalking Carol Kane, but he's snuck into her apartment and he's going to kill her. But Carol Kane is able to Tony, she does pretty good with the kung fu, right? She's like you kind of don't expect it's going to go the way it goes, but she essentially
Well,
Oh,
and she
I
has a
was
gun.
yeah.
I knew the moment they saw her showing off some sweet judo moves that we were going to get martial arts Carol Kane.
Yes.
Like I
That's
would have
right.
been mad if we did not at this
She
point.
kicks him in the face. I love it. I really love it. And puts him down immediately. Like boom, and he drops like a sack. It's it's really great. So that actually is pretty cool. But she still manages to get shot.
That scene is really fun where he's hidden and we know where he
Yes.
is, but
Yeah,
she
that's a
doesn't know
good
where he
scene. It
is.
is.
So she's walking around
Yes.
with the gun, and then it's only when he leaps out onto her that she gets to fight him. But yeah,
By the
and yeah,
way, the moment that at that moment when after a long day she comes into her apartment and the first thing she does is untucks her blouse. Looked to me like the best, like that was good business. I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this before, but nothing has
Right.
ever looked more real to me before than she comes in and the first thing is she's done with having that thing tucked in, and I I thought that was great. There are flashes here where it's cool, but
Mhm.
yes. So anyway, off she goes to the hospital because she has unfortunately been shot in the
Well,
chest.
she kicks him, and then he is blending in,
Mm,
and they go, "Oh, where's the gun?" And he shoots her.
yeah, that's right.
So
The
then,
Charles Durning, yeah.
yeah, and then
Charles Durning comes in, and then yeah, all that happens, right?
thus ending our villains. He can no longer be either in that Pink Floyd poster with all the women painted like Pink Floyd covers. He can't be in that. And he misses calling just a little bit too early. He could have been part of either a Tool video or a Tool stage show. And sadly, because of his whatever
Or
trauma,
Blue Man Group. He could have worked at Blue Man
true,
Group.
yeah. But
Yes.
he's so intricate that I think those two things, Tool or that Pink Floyd poster, are I think where his talents would really lie. Because he just painted himself blue, just blue in himself.
Yes.
Thanks to Tobias. Okay. Would
That
not be
is
a challenge for him. In the same way as painting yourself up like bricks,
you're
and
right. Yeah.
but it's so off the rails. It's so bizarre. It's such a bizarre choice that it's not just that he painted himself to hide in the shadows to do his ventriloquism act. Like, this is a man who paints bricks on himself. Like, he's this intricate blend in. Like, it's almost an X-Files episode. It's like a
Yes.
non-supernatural.
Yes.
I mean, it's like a non-supernatural kind of tombs thing or something. Like, it's
No,
just
you're exactly right. Yes.
what?
Mulder wants to know how this guy is getting into these places and finally works out. He goes there early, he goes once, takes photographs, builds a costume of paint, sneaks in again early, then does his crime, and then I guess somehow sneaks
I
out.
mean, it's a cross between that and like those like the wall in the Spider-Man Electric Company hats.
Yes.
Like the little skits. It's like somewhere between. It's like the scary version of that.
You're
But
right. I forgot all about
it
the
ends
wall
his
thing.
career totally about. He can't. His body paint villainy is over at this point. But I'm so torn because it's such bizarre business, but again, I think it feels like there should have been more bizarre business of some. I don't know.
Yes.
Like,
No,
I mean, I
I
guess
think you're
if you
right.
saw it several times, it wouldn't be as impactful at the end, right? Because that's kind of scary. Which again makes it feel like a buddy cop drama episode. It feels like an episode of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's such a bizarre, like, it's so many bizarre choices. Fascinating. I'm glad they didn't just. It could have been even worse, and they could have not made bold leaps. But once this stuff starts happening, that's where you're like, I kind of wish there was more lead up to this, because it's just so weird. Like, it's such a cool, crazy choice that doesn't involve like, oh look, he's calling from inside the house again. He's like
Yeah.
attacking from inside the house because he is part of the house.
No, that's an
What a
excellent
weird.
line.
That would have been a much better title. Well, except that the other one wasn't calling from inside the house. It was
Right.
when a stranger calls.
Of course.
But it would
But
have been if the first one had been the calls inside the house. It'd be like the the guy. I don't know. I guess it couldn't work. But
Just
it's
Yeah.
having
really
Charles
funny.
Durning, you guys are giving us so much that this movie would have been kind to actually give us as well,
And
and
I again, it's not fair to say, oh, the movie would be so much better if they did things the way I would think they would. But like, I
Mm.
just it commits in such a way at the end that it really does feel like, I want to root for you. I want more of that business, because
Yeah.
that's where you're really like, you're setting up for something. Just again, it's why X-Files works. Like, that stuff, that's the magic we haven't seen.
Yeah.
And it's in the darkness and all this stuff. Like, that's I think that's what's frustrating, is we get so much just sitting at a table dialogue, and then smarmy cops, and then mousy victim who's being attacked and traumatized, and that's terrible. Like, you don't you
Yeah.
want to root for her, like, it's terrible. And just weird clues like the witness protection program like pamphlet for like what
Right.
all that this just
I have to
random
admit, I don't
stuff.
even remember what that is, but I remember
It just was a
vaguely that
pamphlet, and you're like, was this part of something about the kids? We don't know.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the
They still don't tell
Gonzo-y
us what happened to the kids. Yeah.
the Gonzo-y stuff that's just makes up the like WTF factor.
Yes.
I
It
just assumed the
just feels like
pamphlet
there
was
should
for
have been
the.
more, and I think this would have been an even more like, whoa, they really swung for the fences in this, you know. Sorry,
I
Julia.
assumed the pamphlet was for the women's services thing that they worked at, but I didn't take a good look at it.
I don't remember.
I don't know.
Boy, so
Yeah,
strange,
there's a lot
man.
of a lot of
Okay.
folds.
But there's a final bumper, which is Carol Kane goes to the hospital and she's put in the same room with the babysitter who has awoken and awakened. I'm sorry, and so that's good. She
Woken up.
survived being shot in the head, and she's gonna
She
be
survived, but nobody ever tells us for sure that whether she was shot. Which I'm assuming she was shot by him because of the whole journal entry about how the phones and the lights were out and whatever. We
right.
also don't find
Oh
out why she
yeah,
went back to her apartment, but whatever.
that was interesting too, because no, she does have this journal entry, which is interesting. Or that would have also been a nice like where they're discovering stuff at like throughout the journal entries, you know. But they track that down and they end up like, oh, that may not have been her. That was tied into the villain. But I don't know. Overall, that stuff ends up just being frustrating.
Agreed.
Yes. Yes. So that's the end. I do want to mention that I really did enjoy seeing Charles Durning
Oh, absolutely.
stalking the guy through the streets. that was that was just kind of cool. Once again, Charles Durning, who is a huge dude, and not a very fast person, but nevertheless, he just has just no pun intended, just a heft about him, right? And it's when he does, come into the dark alley with the ventriloquist, you do worry about the ventriloquist more than Charles Durning, and that's pretty cool.
Well, especially since you know that Charles Durning loves taking the law in his own hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
That
So
is that is not changed between movies. He still loves shooting first and asking questions later.
you're totally right. Oh my goodness. There's another scene, by the way, that we didn't mention where Durning is just doing his gumshoe thing, and he figures out where the ventriloquist lives, and he spends like this very strange long David Lynchian moment interviewing the lady down the hall, and they're the lady sort of stares into space, and Charles Durning just tries to ask her questions. It's yet another just weird
Yeah.
moment.
Again, I just want more of that. Like I
Yeah,
just so wished
it should be more of
we
that
got
stuff. Oh,
so much more of that. It's almost there. And
yeah,
that's what's bizarre and again, like I said, frustrating is like it could have gone down at least as that. Because I think, I think we discussed it before. Kind of the worst thing, and I'm sure stuff I've written has met this fate. The worst thing, and I think as a creator and as just if you're a viewer, listener, whatever, is when something just sits right in the middle. If
yeah,
it art can, wow, that's amazing. And I don't mean that everything has to be, because I think we spend too much of our time with this kind of thumbs up, thumbs down attitude.
sure.
Like I think that it's a 1 star, it's a 5 star, and that's hyperbole are the worst on both sides. But so I think that there's room for everything kind of to be in those gray areas. But I think as far as art goes, one of the worst things that can happen is to not be memorable or just be kind of sit in that trough. And I'm also, and I say this as a person also who's an advocate of sometimes people will go, oh, that was just a rom-com, or that was just a
Right.
action movie or whatever. And I go, you know what? Sometimes I just want a pepperoni pizza.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to have truffle oil or, fancy. Like sometimes I just go to the theater and I want that, or I watch it, or I turn on TV and I go, I just want to see this thing.
Yeah.
And it's fine if it's not like groundbreaking. But there's a difference between not groundbreaking and just kind of existing. And I think that's the danger of and that's kind of the worst thing for art. And I'm sure there's stuff I've done that hits like that, but it's almost better to have one reaction one way or the other. But I'd rather sit in the 4-star area than the hyperbole or the 1 star. So I don't know where
I think I agree with you that we should not be tempted towards just a simple thumbs up, thumbs down, because I know I way more love to watch something that where I can find lots of things where, it might be improved one way or the other, but it has a few things that are really memorable and I want to go back and look at. Like, I've seen this movie a couple times, whereas there's a lot of way better films that I've only seen once. So
Yeah.
um
Well, I think the
it's
thing that saves this movie is the weird bits, and that's why we
right,
react to it, right?
right,
Like,
absolutely.
and that's what's frustrating is there's movies where they just kind of go by and it doesn't evoke an emotion, and that always bums me out because you want people to be successful and you want to react to art, and for whatever reason that doesn't always happen. Had it just been more like the middle parts, I think this would have been there, but because we have a truly bizarro third section
Yeah,
is why it's, I think, gotten even the reaction that it has.
yeah.
Certainly why it's on Blu-ray and such.
So we should probably get our final thoughts and then move on to our endorsements. And by the way, we'll have more thoughts even about this and the previous one because we've still got yet another When a Stranger Calls movie to cover. All right, Drew. I don't know. Did we miss anything? Is there anything that we should and let us know? Otherwise, just let us know what your final thoughts are.
I think we've given this movie more consideration than it probably deserves. I'm glad I saw this movie once. I doubt I will ever revisit it. To Tony's point, the faceless ventriloquist dummy will probably be the thing that I take away from this, and I will most likely forget everything else about it. It's definitely not as interesting as the original film. But your mileage may vary. If you're looking for your sweet, unfiltered tap of 1990s nostalgia, I could see that this movie might do that for you. That's all I got.
That's very good though. Thank you very much. Julia, what about you?
I mean, I've pretty much said everything. I think that there's a lot of parts that were irritating to me. I feel like there was another movie that was either on the cutting room floor or just in a script somewhere that should have happened and didn't. And then there's a Lava Shark production that should happen.
Yes.
But there's the performances are interesting. I did like the whole weird makeup I think in addition to the faceless dummy, I think the thing with the I because I like I
It's a
said, the
wonderful
only I
idea.
remember the thing about about you know Robert Downey Jr. and Sherlock just uh blending in Sherlock Holmes blending into things. So it's definitely a thing that sticks with me, that visual. So I
Hmm.
think it would stick with me, especially when this like he opens his eyes and they're like I said, the cartoon eyes. So yeah, I think that is the most memorable for sure. It's just
Yeah.
that character, and it is unfortunate that they didn't do more with it.
Excellent. Tony, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's interesting bits, and I think it's kind of neat to kind of go back to the original cast doing what they do. Like I said, I think the just bizarre parts, like the hospital and the makeup and ventriloquism stuff, really sell this movie more so than kind of when they try to kind of rehash the original. I kind of it kind of makes me want to see an homage to this though in the background of some movie. Like I would love to catch some guy in a coffee shop or nightclub like doing an existential dummy act with and you go, oh my god, they just reference the when a stranger calls back, like that's the dummy guys
Yes.
in the background. Like you could see that happening in some kind of more meta, a newer Scream or something. They're in a bar and there's that happening. Like I would love to see that kind of stuff because I always kind of dig on that. I like when this movie kind of goes for that stuff. I just wish there was more of it.
Yeah.
Even though I think everybody's doing a fine job with what they're given on screen, and it's cool to see Carol Kane like kicking ass. That's awesome. Bringing the team back together. That's fascinating. Because I think we had talked about we didn't quite maybe get quite enough
No.
of that in the
Right.
previous one. So in theory, having more of that would have been good, but they took to me the safer route in all of their interactions up until the end, of course. But Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this definitely isn't something I would kind of revisit that much, other than its novelty
Yeah.
and to kind of catch that crazy act again. But I like that we covered it because it's the bits that are there that tie back are pretty interesting.
Excellent. I also kind of appreciate, even though we mentioned that this movie raises too many questions and fails to let us know that it's answering them, and doesn't answer some of them, which is just yeah, evidence of possibly interference from the network, or maybe stuff left on the cutting room floor. Any number of things could explain all of that. But I do like that this movie is less experimental in structure than the first film. I mean, it feels a lot more. It has much more of a thriller-like structure, even with all of those problems we just mentioned. So that's cool. And as we move into the next one, which is 2006, so it's 13 years after this, Hollywood has gotten even more structured. So I'm going to bet that when you get to a 2006 movie, it's going to feel much more like a clockwork film that we're accustomed to in Hollywood movies today. So it'll be fun to find it, because this was 1993, so that's still whatever it is, it's 30 years ago. So a lot has changed in the structure of films in that time. Okay, let's get our endorsements. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to foist on us. We've been off a week, so we're slowly getting back into the swing of things. Drew, we're starting with you. What do you got for us?
On Tubi, I enjoyed seeing A Study in Terror, which is a Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper movie that comes from the 60s.
Oh
Not to
yeah.
be confused with the also excellent Murder by Decree made by our friend Bob Clark. Murder by Decree has actually for a long time been a lot easier to see. So I actually own a copy of that one, but I've never been able to see A Study in Terror until this last weekend. And I think it's really fun. It's a lot different than Murder by Decree, despite having the exact same plot. Like, it's much pulpier and it feels like kind of more akin to a Hammer film. I actually think it would be really fun to do both of those on the show at one
It's a
point.
great
But
idea. Yeah.
yeah, you can check that out on Tubi. And yeah, also I am going to Baltimore Comic Con soon. I'm going to have signings and panels, which I hope to be able to give more thorough information on the next show. But in the meantime, just check out my socials for that, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Julia, what about you? Endorsements.
For me, it's repeat of I think a pair of shows that you can watch together, which are The After Party and Only Murders in the Building. I think those are both a lot of fun and similar vibes. So I'm having a lot of fun with those
Excellent.
shows. Early Murders is back for a new season with Paul Rudd and Meryl Streep and Jesse Williams and who's the other person? There's another star that's what's her name, Jason? That's Steve Martin's girlfriend on
Oh,
the show.
Andrea Martin.
Andrea
Yeah, from
Martin, yeah.
SCTV. Yes.
Yeah, so it's a great cast, in addition, of course, to Martin Short and Steve Martin, and Selena Gomez, who are the three anchors of the show. But no, it's super fun, and the After Party is super fun too. So if you enjoy mysteries and comedies, this is both of those. Those are both of those things.
Excellent. Tony, what do you have?
Yeah, I'm gonna, Julia, those are good. We're caught up, and I'm like, oh man, like I thought everything on the After Party was, I thought it was done, and they're like, oh, now we're caught up to the weekly. Boo. I don't know. But yeah, those are both really good. I actually really enjoyed Blue Beetle. I didn't know how much.
Oh yeah, we did too. We had a lot of fun with that. Yeah,
and the right crowd got it, and and also going back to the Fantastic Fest. Well, like the Draft House, the director did some Fantastic Fest media stuff, posters and such. And there's an interview in the pre-show, and then he showed his other movie, his debut, his movies at Fantastic Fest. So it's kind of cool, like an Austin connection.
Well, and I have to tell you, I actually grew up with my parents, who are from Nicaragua, watching El Chapulín Colorado on the TV. So I was like, yeah.
So he said that he and the writer, that was their first superhero.
Yeah.
Like in
I
the
totally
interview
remember
thing.
that.
That was really like that's cool. Like and again, that's why I like going to not just because I work there, but like that I've always enjoyed when what they put together pre-shows. It was cool to see this, and that the fact that that's canon in the in DCU now is amazing. And everybody, it was a good crowd. Everybody got the humor that was there. There's some really great parts in there. I also really enjoyed. I thought it was really solid. Gran Turismo, which I was found fascinating. Of course, the video game tie-in as well as the real life tie-in.
Yeah, I'm gonna go see that after I get over the
I was
COVID.
pretty. I was digging it a lot, especially since I had played the original. I think in Japanese because at Origin we had a really good games library that we could check out games, and the guy who was running it would just get stuff from Japan. He had it all hooked up, so I played several games where I could do a disc swap method on the PlayStation 1 and play that. So it was kind of cool. Like the video game tie-in as well as the underdog story. I thought it was solid. It kind of goes where you think it might go, but everybody in it's great. I really enjoyed that. There was a couple of other things that I've been watching now. I'm just drawing a blank, but that's been my main. Those were my main movies I've seen over the last few weeks. So, and then again, gearing up for Fantastic Fest, and I'm gonna again plead with our viewers if there's movies that you go to the Fantastic Fest page and you look at the slate of movies and you're like, I want to know about this. Let us know. Interact. I'll try to go see those, and if it's possible to get interviews for that, we'll do that as well. But I would like to catch the things that people are interested in, or even better, if you're coming to Fantastic Fest, that would be great too.
So I want to endorse the first thing that pops into my mind is just if you haven't checked out the RiffTrax app on Roku, I'm sure that we've mentioned this before, and we're not endorsed by RiffTrax, but honestly, they have like a lot of different stuff up there. A lot of it's free. A lot of it's part of their subscription service, which is pretty cheap, and it has a free trial. But they actually did When a Stranger Calls Back, so you can watch the RiffTrax version. So I watched this twice this weekend. I watched the original and I also watched the RiffTrax just to see what they would do with it. But that is pretty neat. I mean, also, there's a brand new movie out called The Dive that is about these two sisters that go for a dive, and one of the sisters gets stuck under a rock that falls and pins her, and they have to figure out how to keep her alive and rescue her. The other sister is swimming up to the top, back and forth, trying to find tools to try to free her sister and trying to find more air to bring down, and it is one of the most tense thrillers I've ever seen. Very new in theaters and on demand. The Dive, you got to check that out. So that's my endorsement of the week. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. We will be back next week with When a Stranger Calls 2006. I cannot wait to discuss that. And this has been a really fun retrospective. If you're listening to this and you're like, this makes me think of some other possible retrospectives you should do, we would love to hear those recommendations. So, and also let us know what you think. Thanks a lot. Have a fantastic evening or afternoon or whatever this is. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.